every outlet is guilty to some degree of chasing the clicks. And unfortunately, when you do that, it results in stories that are maybe less than substantive.
Hey, nowadays, videos 3-5 minutes, nobody watch.
What do you think of that when they say, I get my news from Mothership?
I despair.
Hi, I'm Sharda Harrison and welcome to SGNOW. As you can see, we have moved out of the kopitiam and here we are in my living room studio. And with me in the studio today, we have CityJo Carson. Hey, Carson.
Hello, Sharda.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Do you like your comfy new seats?
Yeah, very nice. It's got cushion now.
It's very cushioned, I have to say.
Yes.
Anyway, we have a special guest in the house. We have Nicholas Yong.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
I've worked in journalism for the last 16 years. Started in broadcast journalism at MediaCorp Radio, 938 Live.
Wow.
And then I moved on to the Straits Times. I was largely a lifestyle reporter, but then I went on to Yahoo News, where I spent 8 years. I was what you call a generalist, covering general news, but I specialized in political news and human interest features.
Right.
So I recently left Yahoo and still looking for a role in journalism.
Actually, today we are talking about journalism in Singapore, and I'm going to get all the answers from Nicholas over here, who is a veteran and the expert on it. Our CityJo Carson over here went out onto the streets of Singapore to find out what Singaporeans thought about our local media news scene. Let's check out that video.
I've been a citizen journalist for just over a year now. It's been a fascinating journey and has broadened my horizons. The news media landscape has changed over the years, especially with the advent of the internet and social media. Today, I'm going to find out more about us Singaporeans and where we get our news from. Where do you get your news from?
Mainly from internet. Facebook, Instagram.
Most of the time online, Straits Times, Mothership.
Online, Instagram, Twitter.
Mostly is online. So I get it, the CNA that is pushed to me, and then also on Google's.
I think there are many journalists out there who are really trying their best, but then because of many other more people like the more juicy news.
For us, because we are getting a lot of other news online. And then I think the big challenge for most of us is, where do we get our news, reliable news, right?
So far, I feel it is okay. More or less, because I also listen in other sources, I find that the state is quite alright.
I think it's quite politically controlled.
CNA, I think the reporting, for me, is reliable, right? But whether you get a full story, sometimes I have to look elsewhere also to get a balanced view.
Usually I just scroll through Instagram, then if there's any news online, I will just watch it.
I read news overseas also, okay? I see there are differences between our reporting and overseas. Local news is more pro to government. Like Bloomberg, CNBC are more pro-West. But we have to read news from China. We have to read news from other places.
I'm not a media guy myself, so I won't really be able to speak for other countries. But I think generally speaking, Singapore they are not really giving out fake news lah. So I don't think it's that bad lah. Yeah, I think in other countries the fake news is way more than Singapore. Yeah. So I think we're pretty good, yeah.
Do you think that our news in Singapore is of a good quality?
Honestly, no.
And how does that compare with other news that you're listening to?
I guess it's mostly just the standard in which people portray the news. It's not something that I actually really look out for. It's just from a surface level, I just feel like the standard is lower lah in people's presentation and such.
Quality-wise is good, okay? It's good. I think CNA has clinched some very, very international awards.
Most of the people I talked to had a positive view of the news reported in Singapore. Although some felt that there is some form of restraint, they acknowledged that it is for the overall good of Singapore. I'm reassured that most people felt that news in Singapore is reliable and accurate. They would know where to turn to for alternative points of view if they want to. I'm CityJo Carson at Toa Payoh for Singapore One.
Okay, and we're back. Carson, wow, you got, a variety of answers from that video, but what are your first sort of reactions from that video?
Many people had positive things to say, right? And of course, you kind of dig a little deeper, and then they will say, "Hey, it's good, but it could be better," right? And I think what's interesting for me is that most of the people I spoke to, they said, "Okay, if I can always get the news from a Singapore point of view, and if they want to, they can get it from other sources."
What were your thoughts on the video?
I think, most of them said that they get their news online, and that reflects the average reader all around the world, and I think it's good that they named a variety of sources and they are aware of bias, but I think it also reflects a certain, for lack of a better word, uninformed viewpoint about maybe how news is produced, what is considered bias, what is considered objective journalism. This sort of uninformed viewpoint is not surprising. I think you find it across most countries. Maybe there needs to be more media education in this country. I think there needs to be a greater understanding and awareness of the role of the media in a democratic society. So very often when I give talks to students, right, I would ask, can anyone name the 3 branches of government? It's half-half. Some can name, some can't. So of course it's the legislative, judiciary, and executive. But there is a 4th unofficial branch of government that's often called the 4th estate, which is the media. So just as with the 3 branches of government, it is meant to be a watchdog on authority. Now, of course, the government has said many times that it doesn't subscribe to this point of view. It sees journalism as having what they call a nation-building role, right? It is meant to explain the policies of the government rather than to question it. And the government itself has said many times, we don't have a free press in Singapore. It's certainly not in the way that you find in liberal Western countries. I think it is important for the press to function independently in order to fulfill its role of informing, educating, entertaining, but I think above all of keeping the populace informed in order to be able to make informed choices in their lives. I would argue that the watchdog role of the media is an important part of nation building because, again, the populace must be informed, thoroughly informed, in order to make informed choices about everyday decisions, like where to buy a flat, should I buy a car, which party should I vote for, right? If you're not informed, you cannot make informed choices, and if you're not making informed choices, then society as a whole suffers. It is part of what in a democracy is called checks and balances, right? So, for example, if there is corruption, if there is malfeasance, it is the role of the media to report on it. For example, right, if the media doesn't dare to do it, if they are afraid of retribution, if they are afraid of consequences, then it is not serving its function, right? And in order to do its job of informing the populace, there's many factors that come into play. Like, if I send questions to a ministry, there should be some reasonable expectation of informed answers with the context, with the facts and the figures that I'm asking for. Unfortunately, in this country, very often in my experience, you find that agencies are not obliged to give you answers. If they decide to, they can just not tell you. Some years back, I wrote about this. So my colleague and I were working on a story about maid abuse. So my colleague and I were working on a story. We sent queries to the Manpower Ministry. a very detailed list of questions. And I still remember the exact answer that they gave us. They said, we cannot facilitate your queries. So my colleague and I were stunned, like, but why not? And why is it that a ministry can just say, well, I don't want to answer you? In the States, there's this thing called the Freedom of Information Act, where basically government agencies can be compelled to provide answers. We don't have anything of the equivalent, right? So very often you may find if you ask the government for answers, you get something incomplete. Now, I'm not saying that every agency does that, but I'm saying that in my experience, and I think if you ask reporters, you find that often does happen.
Right.
Although having said that, I would say these days ministries are probably a bit more open. I think they are aware of public expectations, and they do try their best, but sometimes you get something like what the Manpower Ministry